Hey guys, welcome back to Break the Gate podcast. We got Dawn, who is the Dawn Wolfe, who is the animal talent agent for Positively Famous. She's also a podcast host for Positively Famous podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This is going to be fun to talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, same question I ask everybody. Could you go into a little bit of how you got started as an animal talent agent and what led to you creating your own company?
Well, I'll try to condense as best I can. I ended up getting some Jack Russells back in the early 2000s. They started getting some work with a agency that had hired me, and at one point, a couple years into that relationship, I just found that I was getting frustrated with actually more like the owner of the company and the way that he would speak to me and speak to a friend of mine who worked for him. And I just couldn't continue that. And I was talking with a guy who was named Captain Haggerty, who's a legend in the dog training industry. And Cap said, Dawn, just open your own agency. And I was like, okay, sir, I will just do that.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so it's really, that's, I never really thought of being an agent. I've been a professional dog trainer for 30 years. And again, my animals got started doing the business, but I never grew up thinking, oh, I want to be an agent. I always thought, oh, I want to be the one controlling the dog and telling the dog and training the dogs to do the the jobs. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I feel like that's pretty common though. Most people don't necessarily have that particular, title in mind when they're doing these certain things. They're not saying, "Oh, I wanted to be a music supervisor because and this is what I did to get there." It was they more or less kind of fell into the position and then they just kind of stuck with it because they loved it, and that's very common in the entertainment industry.
Well, and I think, hopefully this is common too. Some people get into a role and they think I can do that better. So
Mm,
that was my thing. I think I can do a better job with this, and especially when it comes down to the way I think animals should be treated. Because let's
sure.
just go back a long time ago, 30, 40 years, and when I first got started into it, and it was basically, and it still probably does go on, that some people have, like, just say a farm, right, and
Mm-hmm.
they have dog kennels outside, right? Like a boarding kennel type situation. It's
Sure.
covered, but those are where those animals live, until it's time for the animal to go on set, and then it's like, don't feed that dog today, give it a few treats, brush it up, give it a bath, do a little prep work with it, and boom, it's going on set tomorrow or going for what they used to call a look-see, and, hope that everything goes well. And then, that dog would work for a day or two and then go back into a boarding kennel situation for the next 6 to 8 months. Depends on when that dog would get a
Mm,
job again. And I just don't believe in treating animals like that. It's
yeah,
one thing when you have
absolutely.
like farm animals, like you got pigs and you got chickens, and, you're doing, those types of animals and like taking them on set and stuff like that. But keeping dogs out in a boarding kennel just does not work for me. And again,
No.
but a lot of the um, companies back in the day, they wanted all of that control. They didn't want to have to go to a pet person and rent that person, that hire that person to come on set to do stuff. They wanted all of that control with their particular animals. And so the thing that's really different about my business is, and I also think that a lot more people have gotten into dog training, right, with their animals and doing dock diving and all of these fun
Mm-hmm.
sports. Animals have become much more, indoor pets. Your best friend, your companion. You're taking them to do stuff. So that's what I do. Is I hire those people that have very well trained dogs that do all kinds of fun things with them. And this is just one more
Yeah.
fun thing that they can come and do as work with me on set.
What are some of the different training techniques that they have to be kind of have to have down in order to be able to be considered a dog that it was, or an animal for that matter, that was able to be on some kind of set?
Okay, so what type of behaviors do they really
Correct.
need?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the right. Yep, that's what I was trying to say. Yep.
Okay. So, well, I mean, at the very least, you need to have a solid sit stay because at least with a solid sit stay, we can take an animal and put it next to an actor, put it next to a product. And as long as we can make little noises to try to get the dog to look a certain way or put its ears up, that's your first thing you need to have, right?
Okay. Okay.
And
Sure.
then from there, obviously basic obedience, being able to walk nice on a leash with an actor or a model is also super important because you don't want to have the actor or the model trying to say, hey, no, heel, right? So that's something
Yeah.
you have to train by working with other people, because if you don't train that, then the moment you hand a dog over to a stranger, it's going to be like, oh my God, who are you and where are we going, and I want to be with my mom, and it looks terrible. you know
Yeah.
so, and then from there, you get into more advanced things like being able to send a dog away to place, right? And then once it gets to place, have it turn around and maybe sit and then wave at you, or speak on command, and maybe come
Mm,
back to you and be able to stop it halfway and tell it to lay down and put its head down. So those are, there's a whole range of once you get more advanced. But
yeah. And I apologize if I ask questions that are not on what I sent you because I'm just generally genuinely interested in this
oh, you
title,
can
and
ask
what
me
you do.
anything. I
Yeah.
I enjoy off the cuff things. So
Yeah, and the questions are more a structure in case I can't think of anything on the spot, So, but what I was
yes.
getting at was how do you know how do I word this question? So so you've seen on TVs or different movies how the intention behind the dog is because it is very um not necessarily aggressive. It's so you've seen some of the kids movies where the dog is very hard to manage, and that's kind of the whole thing behind the movie because he's constantly running and getting into stuff and then pulling the actor and doing all this stuff. How much of that is dog training and how much of that is staging?
Well, a lot of it, I would say, is staging, but when you get into movies, m a
Yeah.
lot of times it's actually, uh, the same breed, but 3 or 4 or
Okay.
5, 6 different dogs that will play that part. Because some dogs,
Oh, sure.
they just have different behavior. So when you want the wild, crazy dog on the leash who's jumping up, then you might use the one who we haven't done maybe a lot of training with,
Oh,
right? And so you
okay.
really get that
Yeah.
natural craziness, from that dog, right? But a lot of it
Yeah, absolutely.
is very staged because these days, actually, a lot more mixed breeds are being used, and it's very hard to match mixed breed dogs.
Sure.
So which was
That
sometimes we
yeah.
have a Hollywood person who actually paints the dogs and colors the dog to make them all
Oh,
look
wow.
identical, as well. She was actually a guest on one of my shows. She was very fun to talk with.
That's cool. I didn't know that was a job. Is
Yeah, she's
would
an
did does
animal
it fall into
colorist.
some That's cool. I would like to have her on the podcast.
Yeah, she's
I
great.
like I'd like exploring different, positions in the entertainment industry because and that was the whole point of the podcast was to be able to kind of go into as many different positions as possible because you never know what's out there. And, I've had people that tell me like, wow, this has changed my life because I didn't know this existed before. And that's the whole goal behind this. I want to interview like the niche, the different things, and a lot of people didn't realize that there was animal talent agents, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, offline too, about the differences, and doing it through a studio and going through an animal talent agent. But yeah, it's cool to see that there's so many different diverse roles out there in
There
the entertainment
is.
world. Um, so I guess the next question then is, and we kind of went into this a little bit. Um, with working with animals can be unpredictable sometimes despite the fact that they are trained. How do you kind of ensure the safety and well-being of the animal actors themselves during the productions? I know you've also mentioned that you're really big on making sure that they are treated as animal, as you would want to treat your own dog, and
Yes.
not just got sent to a kennel, and how do you
Yes.
make sure that they get treated nicely on production is what I'm getting at.
Well, so on a movie or on a big commercial, right? Anything that's going to air on network TV, a lot of times there's an animal safety rep, right? And that animal
Okay.
safety rep is a liaison between my trainers, myself, and the production. So when there's not that, okay, I always tell my trainers, listen, this is what is in the script. This is the storyboard. This is what's supposed to happen. If you get there and there's something that you're not comfortable with, okay, that's about to happen,
Hmm.
call me, FaceTime me. Let me see exactly what the situation is. And, I also have some of my trainers who have a lot of experience doing this, and they will make other suggestions to the production. Like one time I sent some Dalmatians, literally 4 Dalmatians, to go do a shoot in New York City. And they said that the little girl was going to be about 7. She was about 3.5, maybe 4.
Oh, wow.
And in the middle of New York City, if you can imagine, the streets and the crosswalks, they wanted this little girl to hold the dogs going across the crosswalk, and
Okay.
or even just hold one of the dogs. And my trainer said, absolutely not. What we're going to
Yeah.
do is we're going to stage that, and she can hold the leash, and I'm going to put my dog's feet so it looks like it's moving. And we're going to say, stand, and you can take all the pictures that you want, but we're not having her actually hold the leash and this dog moving, because
Yeah.
that little girl could get hurt, you know.
Absolutely.
And then they actually did put the dogs up on another part of the I don't know, it was like steps or something. And again, they wanted the little girl to hold the leashes. And in the middle of it, the little girl just threw the leashes. Well, again, those dogs are all trained not to run
Yeah.
away and stay.
Sure.
So yeah, sometimes we have to say no and come up with other ways to accomplish it. But at the end of the day, it's always about the animals being safe. And unfortunately, it just seems like the productions don't always have people who really think about the safety of the animals, especially when you get into some of like the bulldogs, right? Those dogs
Yeah.
can't breathe very well as it is. To put them in a very hot location, right? And you don't even have like a holding room with air conditioning, then you should not hire those breeds in the middle of summer
Yeah.
when it's really hot. Do that in a colder weather shoot, but those are some of the
Sure.
considerations we have to think about, because my trainers are like, no, we're not going to go sit up where you don't have any air conditioning. We're going to go sit in our car with the air, and you give us a walkie-talkie, and when you're ready
Yep.
for us, we'll bring the dog up. But that's just what has to happen with certain breeds.
Yeah. I appreciate that you take so much consideration to that. I feel like, it's very easy for somebody to not think about those things, especially on a studio perspective when they've got a million things going on and they're not thinking logistically, hey, we have to make sure we do this shoot around a time frame that works best for the dog. Because they've got their actors that are paying, thousands, hundreds of
Yes.
thousands of dollars. They're the crew, the whole production team, everybody. There's so many other moving components to this. So we need somebody like you to kind of vouch for these animals and say, hey, we got to treat them nicely too.
Well, ideally, it's a collaboration between me and the production, and
Yeah.
this is where those pre-production things can come in, and we can like talk about them. But unfortunately, a lot of things, they do get changed spur of the moment, and that's one of the reasons I want to do the podcast. Is I'm going to do some podcasts again for my animal talent people who want their pet to be famous, but also for the production people to be like, hey, if you want to work with animal actors, here's some things you might not have thought about. Okay, that are really
Yeah.
important. Like, don't have the dog do the really active scenes at the end of the day when the dog is spent, it's tired, it's
Right.
panting. Do those at the very beginning. Do the sleeping dog stuff at the end of the, and sometimes they just
Yeah.
don't even think of that when you're working with an animal, you're going to get some of the best shots if you just ask the people that you're working with, when do you think I should do this? Like, what should it go like throughout the day? So.
Yeah. Do you, when you get these animals, are they typically somebody else's, and then you just kind of have to work with them, or are they on your own, your own animals, or how does that work?
Well, so yes, my own animals used to work a lot, but yes, I hire professional trainers and pet owners to go out and
Okay.
do these things. No, I'm not. I mean, as much as I would love to have like so many dogs in this house right now that I was just
Yeah.
surrounded by them, I
Right.
I have
Right.
one. at the moment,
Okay.
Buzz. And but yeah,
Yeah.
so I hire a lot of professional trainers, and on certain jobs, I do have to go out and I do have to work with the animal talent that we've hired to
Yeah.
prep them, or I have to have my trainers prep them for a certain job because some jobs take a lot of specialized training that the trainer
Okay.
never put on that dog. But once I know
Sure.
that that's the perfect dog to do it, would you like an example?
I would love an example,
Okay.
actually.
So we had to do the puppy bowl where a dog is literally with the ref of the puppy bowl driving
Okay.
for Subaru to the puppy bowl, right? And they wanted this dog to be sitting in the back seat, and then the ref has to like turn around, and they want the dog to bark and to like put its paw up. Well, the difficult part of this is not necessarily those behaviors, but they wanted the dog strapped in this certain car seat belt, right? Which is
Okay.
very restrictive, this particular brand. It's very safe brand, right? It's a great
Sure.
brand, but for doing these animal actor behaviors, not so easy. And so, I
Right.
had to have my trainer Jane worked with a very cute doodle named Marley, who I knew that she could pull this off. And the thing that I love about Jane when I give her a task, she practices over and over again, and she FaceTimes me in on things, and she sent me videos, and so I'm working with her as a trainer
Yeah.
to help her, even though she's in Maryland and I'm here in Florida, to get Marley
Wow.
to do that and making suggestions on how to work it out. And it turned out fabulous. But the thing they didn't tell us, again, there's always that one thing when we get to set that they forgot to mention, was that she had to be there at 6 a.m. because they wanted it to be sunrise shot. They didn't
Okay.
mention that they were going to have people shaking the car at the same time to make it look like it was moving. So Marley gets in the back. We got my trainer standing where Marley can see her, and literally people are on each side of the car shaking it now
Oh
while
my
this dog
God.
does these behaviors. Can you imagine?
That's no, I
Uh,
would get anxious just being in the car myself, about it.
yeah, so
Can
it was.
imagine what the dog was like.
Right, but again, it's a great dog, and Jane made sure that she thought it was fun when they shook the car, and it was step by
Yeah.
step for a few minutes to get the dog acclimated, and then they moved on. But that dog has a very solid temperament and a really great work ethic. So,
Yeah.
and those dogs are obviously when you have a great trainer and a great dog, you can just go very far. But not all dogs have that steady of a temperament. Some
Sure.
dogs would just
And
have
that's what I was
shut
just gonna
down.
ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. What that's like, having to deal with that, and how much time do you get to get accustomed to that, prior to the project?
I mean, it really varies, on how we do things, and sometimes we're just winging it. We're just winging it,
Yeah.
just like the production, because they don't really know until we get into it how things are going to go either, and so
Yep.
we just try to do our best to accommodate. But the more uh, information that we have before a shoot to be able to prep an animal, is really the best way to do it. But productions a lot of times, they didn't even contact me, not that one, but some of them don't even contact me until literally 5 days before they need an animal. And I always find that really
Mm.
interesting because wait a minute, you're about
Yeah.
to film or do this production with this video, with a music person or something. You really didn't know that they were going to want an animal like a couple of weeks ago. So,
Right. They just pushed it off because they didn't think there was gonna be much work behind it. That's
yeah,
what it
and
sounds like.
and that makes it really difficult for me. I mean, I pull it off because I have a huge network of people, and I've been doing this for such a long time. But yeah, ideally, if somebody wants, especially an animal that has to do something, not just like sit pretty or something like that, yeah, a couple
Yeah.
weeks notice is great because I have to like reach out to my trainers, see who would be a good fit, who's available. I try to get them to send me video clips of the animal doing exactly what the production is going to want. Like if they wanted to go and jump up on a couch and look like a crazy dog and grab a pillow, the trainers, I call them and I say, hey, I put to do a casting call. You got to send me a video of your dog jumping on a couch and grabbing a pillow and acting like crazy before you even
Yeah.
submit, because I'm going to take a look at that
Mm.
and see,
Sure, sure.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you work mainly in commercials, TV, that kind of stuff, online commercials. What are some of the differences between those and film in terms of acting or you're providing animal actors?
Well, for you mean like movies? Like what's the
Yeah,
difference?
the differences and yeah, in movies versus like commercials, in the terms of providing, animal actresses for the set.
Well, with I'm going to say with movies, there's normally always an animal safety rep. And with movies,
Mm,
we do have a lot more lead time because the production is in contact with the animal safety rep people to
okay.
really make sure every single scene is looked at before we even start. So that's really the
Mm,
big difference. With
okay.
a like a TV commercial where we're gonna have, an animal safety rep there, again, we're probably gonna have at least a week and a half, 2 weeks notice on that. It's the ones that
Oh,
are
sure.
just for, like, online or just, a print or something like that, that we don't have that. So, that's when it can
Okay.
get a little bit more down to the wire quickly with stuff.
Sure. And as far as animal talent agent is concerned, too, would you find there's more available for commercials than there are for movies, or is it kind of depending on a networking, or is it how does that structure play out?
Well, with movies, I actually have a movie coming out soon with an Exorcist remake movie. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, we supplied a dog for that particular thing. Now, the dog that I supplied did not have any experience doing this, right? But they
Okay.
literally said they needed the dog to be able to do one thing, right?
Okay.
Of course, it's never that, but that's what
Yeah.
they needed. And so what I did was because that trainer did not have experience, the dog did not have experience, I hired an old timer like myself who was local
hmm
to go and
Yeah.
help. Right?
Okay.
So I had the old timer there to help, make sure that everything was gonna go really smoothly. So
Sure.
because that's a big deal, that's a movie,
Yeah.
right? So most of the time, if I'm going to supply a movie dog, right, I'm going
hmm
to use my best trainers, right? I'm gonna use the
Okay.
ones who I know can work things out on the fly. If we need a new behavior very quickly because they just decided, can the dog go and put its paws up on the windowsill, right? If you haven't taught
Sure.
that, because I actually, before I got into being an agent, I was helping this other person with a dog, and the director said, "Yeah, can you get the border collie to go put its paws up?" And the dog would just slide on the wood, like it just could not stay up there, right? And so then they had
Yeah.
to put some tape to get the dog a little bit more grip. So again, I want to send my best trainers to be able to pull that up because I know it's probably never going to be exactly what it says.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
How does the how does the pay structure work for these animals? Does the money go to the owners, or and if that's the case, what's the typical pay look like, or is it kind of depending on the project?
well, yes, definitely always depending on the project and stuff like that. So, we work.
Yeah.
Well, I want to clarify one thing too is that with humans, right?
hmm
When you have children, right? For instance, that's working, right? You have a manager, right? And then you
Sure.
have an agent, a casting agent, right? And
hmm
in this business, we are all in one. Okay, I
Okay.
am all of that to those people. But the difference also is that people call me all the time. I have this really beautiful cat. I have this great dog, or I got a viral video that just happened on TikTok, and I'm getting all this attention. How can I, make the most of it? How can I make the most of this moment?
Sure.
I don't go out and market animals, okay?
Mm.
People call me, "I need a dog or a cat that can do XYZ," okay? I don't go
Yeah.
out like if you were a human person and you had someone who was, getting some attention, you would call a bunch of people and be like, "Hey, I got this great, this little kid who just did this," and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you would have all those contacts. It does not work that way in this business,
Okay.
okay? And so, essentially as an agent, if you're in, say, Hollywood out there, right?
Sure.
You're going to be probably part of the Teamsters Union, right?
hmm
And there is a set pay schedule, right? Of how much
Right.
animals make, how much trainers make, how much you can charge for prep work. All that is really spelled out. For
Okay.
non-production, there are no guidelines. Okay.
Okay.
And so one of the things is that, basically how I do things with productions is when they call me, I tell them, hey, this particular dog is local. This is what this is going to cost you. I have a fabulous dog about 3 hours away who can pull everything off that you want, but that dog is going to cost you more because I have to have my trainer drive up. We're going to need a hotel room. So, sometimes I'll give a price variant like that. So at the end of the job, my trainers show up, they go do the job. At the end of it, I follow up within a day or two and say, hey, how'd you like the dog? How'd you like my trainer? And that's when I submit my invoice. Normally, I get paid
Okay.
30 to 60 days. At that point, once I get paid, then I pay the negotiated price that I told my trainer I would pay them to go do that.
Okay.
So that's variable,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
you know, trainers who have like a very specialized trick, like for instance, fake peeing on an object. Okay. If
Oh, I
I get a
never even thought of
call,
that.
we need a dog that can fake pee on, a mailbox for this
Yeah.
funny gig that we're going to do. I don't have a
Sure.
lot of dogs that can do that. Okay. So
Right.
the people who I have said, please train your dog to do this, I pay those people a little bit more because they spent the time training that. So that's going to cost
Sure.
that production more because I feel like when you spend a lot of time working something like that out with an animal, you're not going to be able to uh, do that a lot. You're not going to get lots of calls for it, but the time you spent, you should be compensated for. So,
Yeah.
but in general, I like it that a lot of people want to go and do this stuff. I feel like sometimes people would pay me to have their animal go and do
Yeah.
this. And, it doesn't work like that. But, I also am really happy to give animals their very first break. Right. And so
Sure.
sometimes I can say to production who says, hey, we just don't have a lot of money. There's not a lot of money in the budget for this. You know, if it's really super small, I say you should call your neighbor to do
Yeah.
this. Okay. You can't
Mm.
call an agent for something like this. But if there's a little bit of a budget, then a lot of times I call I put a casting call out to some of my trainers and say, hey, I got a very low paying gig. It's super close to probably where you're at. Not going to pay a lot, but you're going to get some experience. And I let
Okay.
the production know these people do not have experience. They have amazingly trained animals, but it's their first time.
Sure.
So I
So
try, yeah.
sorry. On the trainer perspective, then, did they come to you and say, "Hey, I'm a trainer. If you've got anything, you need a dog for or an animal for, let me know." Or how does that work? Or do you look for the trainers?
So two things. I I get texts from people
Yeah.
and they send me pictures of their puppies and I'm like,
Yep.
please don't text
That's
me.
why I was asking that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So on my website, Positively Famous, it says, register your pet. Right. So I have
Mm,
a Facebook community, which is where I really recommend people join that. I have about 3,000 or so people in there. And that's where I'll post some casting calls that I don't go public with. Right?
okay.
Because I know those people. I hold auditions all over the country. I've met people. It's a way for me to kind of get to know people. And I also have it where you can also send me an email. Give me a bunch of pictures of your animal, their experience, your location, your cell phone number. And yeah, I'll go through my emails and be like, oh, I need this breed of dog, or I need an animal in a certain state where, maybe I don't even work a whole lot. And I'll pull up
Sure.
on my emails. So that's
Oh, okay.
really, and then I'll look at those and then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to call this person, see if they're available, see if they're a good fit for this, have them send me some updated photos and videos. But yeah, that's pretty much how I work.
Okay. So, I mean, and Nick's honestly could be any state, right? I mean, but
I work
where do you
all
see
over the
them?
country.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you see the most of them? Is it like your Atlanta, your Georgia, your California, New York?
Well, I was in Jersey, South Jersey, about a half hour from Philly for 20 years. So that's
Okay.
really where I've built up a lot of my business. Um,
Sure.
and so I have a lot of those, what do you call it? Contacts. And I've just been
Yeah.
doing that for such a long time out there. But the internet did change a lot in that sense,
Sure.
because I used to have to get listed in the local production guides in order to get
Mm.
work, right?
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so now I work a lot all over the country, and I do get a lot of calls from like LA, and I just had a couple dogs working in Tacoma, Washington, by Seattle.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, all over the place. So, but I'm going to say, too, that in order to do movie work in Atlanta, you're probably
Yeah.
going to be a Atlanta-based agency for the
Oh, I
movies
see.
because
That
it's the
makes
tax
sense.
credits. It's the tax
Sure.
credits, and so you only can hire local when you're getting tax credits.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I mean, that makes sense, but I didn't
Yes.
really think of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, my parents are from Red Bank, New Jersey.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, Highlands, Red Bank. Yeah. And then they also moved to Orlando, Florida, which is where I was originally from. But yeah, Vero Beach, Orlando, kind of bounced back and forth between the
Okay.
two.
Well, and
Yeah.
the sad thing about where I live here in Florida, which is, the Sunshine State, just like California, just like Hollywood,
Yep.
there's
Yeah.
nothing going on here, right? As far as
Yes.
like a
Right.
lot of, not to, all right, let me rephrase that. It's not that there's nothing, there's very little going
Yes.
on in this state.
No, I know. I that's why I moved out of the state.
Right? It's sad when you
Yeah.
can't even work in your own state, and until
Yeah.
Florida gets the tax credits back, that's just going to be the way things go. And honestly, it's because DeSantis does not want Hollywood here. He just doesn't. And so that's
Right. Yeah.
been a big deal.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I was curious too on how they did the Florida project. Have you ever seen that movie? They filmed in Kissimmee, and they were staying at one of the hotels, and it was with a couple of bigger actors, and I'm blanking on their names right now. But it was very much of a independent project looking film, and I was curious how they did it on because of what you're talking about and the tax credits and using production that's in that area. There's not a lot there in Florida, so I was always curious when they start doing films like that in Florida and states where it's not easy to provide production for because there just isn't that available, and it's expensive because there isn't a lot available. I'm
Yeah, well,
curious as to how
I
they
mean,
do that.
the local, like Tampa, Clearwater, they have a really great film. I guess you call it a film commission, right? We have one here in
Okay, sure.
Sarasota. There are film
Hmm.
commissions around the states, but yeah, when you have an independent film, that's all self-funded. A lot of
Right.
times, and so
Yeah.
they already realize that they're not going to get any of that back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who are trying to get into your particular role, or even as a trainer, what are some of the things that they should be looking at, kind of honing on their own end? What's some advice that you could give them to kind of get into that?
Well, I would say the first thing is really make sure a couple things that the animal that you have, you think would enjoy this. Okay,
Mm,
because
yeah.
it is stress is not always a bad thing. I mean, we all have stress in our lives, but you need an animal who is pretty easygoing, and they can acclimate quickly in new spaces, and it doesn't take them an hour to like relax. And again, that's friendly. If you have an animal, let's just say a dog that, he's the dog just seems to learn stuff. It really enjoys learning. Dogs with a good work ethic is also a really good thing because some dogs, if you only do treat training and then you ask them to do something and they're like, yeah, I don't care about your treat. I don't even
Yeah.
want to do this. Right. I like dogs that do it because I said, oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Right. So it can't
Sure.
always be about treats. Um, But yes, an animal who enjoys it and is ready for it. I have people all the time who are like, I have a 6-month-old puppy and it's so beautiful. And he knows sit and lay down. Can you help me? Get him a job. No, I probably can't. Like, you need to take that dog, and why don't you go and spend some money and go to a group training class, right?
Yeah.
And get that dog acclimated to kind of being around a lot of other dogs and well trained, right?
Sure.
It's like you're
Yep.
trying to say your kid is so cute, right? All kids are pretty much cute, right? But if
Right.
that kid can't even sit down for 2 seconds and say what you want them to say or cross their hands the way that it doesn't matter how cute they are, they're never gonna get work.
Right.
You gotta put
Absolutely.
some
Yeah.
training into them.
Yeah.
So that's
And
that was
retention of training too, I think is important. With our dog, Ozzy, he is a we're not so the we went to a shelter, and what we got was a lab collie mix, but I'm convinced he's got some greyhound in him. Not too sure, but he's extremely smart and he picks up on training very, very quickly. You know, I feel like that might be important as well versus just doing the training, because if it's taken them months for them to pick up on, the sit stay commands, maybe it's not a good option for them to get into this type of
well,
business.
so here's the thing. You got to think about your skill as a trainer, okay? And
Valid.
I went to school to be a dog trainer, okay? I
Yeah.
apprenticed under a military guy, ex-military guy for a year, okay? So
Yeah.
it's like if you said, "Hey, can you fix my plumbing?" I don't know how to fix your plumbing, okay? I know how to work with as a dog trainer. A lot of people think that we train the dogs. Yes, we train animals. We train people, right? So
Sure.
if you're not getting the results that you want from training your dog, then go call a trainer. That's what we're
Yeah.
here for. We're here to help you learn how to be a better trainer, right? And if you can learn those skills, then you may see a huge boost in what your dog actually learns,
Sure.
because now you know more. So that's always my advice.
Right.
Is that's why
That's
there's
that's good
a lot
advice.
of professional trainers out there now.
Yeah. Have you worked with other animals besides dogs?
I have actually. I've worked
Yeah.
with lots of different animals. I'm pretty good with birds. I've had a starling for a pet. I've had lots
Oh,
of
cool.
parrots. I did after we did Dogs 101 and Cats 101 for Animal Planet. They wanted to do Pets 101, and so
Okay.
I got to bring in a lot of like exotic animals and help with them. I've trained pigeons. I mean, I was a
Whoa.
really interesting child. So if you would have
Yeah.
met me when I was 12, right, I
Sure.
would have had a dove here, my
Yeah.
cockatiel here, and I was having my border collie jump
Yeah.
and do circus tricks, right? Then
Whoa.
I would clap my hands at the
Yeah.
park, at like your local park, and I'd hold my hand up, and my pigeon who was circling would land on it like a falcon.
That's cool.
Okay.
Sounds like you
So
were
you can
really
see
cool.
how
Yeah.
I could never go into anything else in my life. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a natural trainer. I've been training animals since I was 7 years old, and
Sure.
animals love me and I love them.
Yeah.
And but I did go to school to be, a dog trainer, and I've been to lots of seminars, and I'm 56 years old, okay?
Sure.
I'm still learning stuff, right? And I still
Yeah.
love learning things. So yeah, so that's the great thing. There's lots of YouTube that people can learn. But if you start trying one thing with your animal and you're like, oh, that doesn't work. Well, as trainers, we go to plan A, B, C, D, and E, right? To figure
Right.
out what
Right.
is going to motivate that. Sometimes you bring out treats and your dog acts like a banana head. It just loses its mind over treats. Well, that's probably not the best thing to train your dog with,
Right.
right? Maybe if you just get a ball and the dog's like, I kind of like balls, but okay, I want the ball, but I'm not insane for the ball. Maybe that's better.
Sure.
Maybe just
Okay.
praise. So
Yeah.
that's where you got to like figure out what motivates an animal to want to do what we ask them to do.
Do you feel like that's harder with some animals, versus others? I mean, I can imagine birds are hard
Absolutely.
to train.
And certain breeds of dogs, okay,
Yeah.
a Shiba Inu, for instance, they're like a
Yeah.
cat, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a German Shepherd who is very trainable, German Shepherds are
Right.
just very, very biddable dogs in most cases. There's a generalizations, and that's the other thing too. Like we have to also not only train the dog how to do the behaviors, we also have to, in a sense, train them how to act, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because, if you have a dog, they're like, we want the dog to look sad, right?
Right.
Well, what are you gonna say to your dog, Chris, to get it to look sad? What would you do?
I don't know. Sometimes he just looks sad, and I'm wondering why.
Right? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, some people might be like, "You're bad. You're a bad dog." And the
Oh,
dog goes,
sure.
"Oh, I'm bad," right? So, or,
Yeah.
you wanna get the head tilt. Not all dogs can do head tilts, but, some dogs, if you go, "Do you want to go bye-bye?" And then you'll get that
Yeah.
head tilt, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So, as trainers, we have to figure out how to bring out emotion in our animals as well. And so, sometimes making, dogs will be sitting there, but their ears are back, right? And they don't look
Yeah.
like as cute. So, we want to be like, "Pop, pop, 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 pop," and all of a sudden the ears are up, but you got
Yeah.
to make sure that the animal doesn't move at the same time as getting the ears up. So, it's
Okay.
just those kind of things. And it's a, I talk to my trainers, and we always do like a debriefing after each thing that we do together. And when they're like, "Oh gosh, I wish I would have known, this was going to happen, or that was going to happen, or that they had that," and I say, "You know what? It's a learning thing." You know what I mean? Don't beat yourself up over what you did not know, or what maybe you thought your animal could have done better if you would have known. Now you know that that might be something that gets asked in the future, spur of the moment, so just work on it, you know?
Sure.
I mean, gotta let it go and move on to the next project. Nothing is always gonna be, perfect. And when it is, then you just, have a great feeling, and you're really proud of your animal, and you're like, "Oh, that was great," and that's always fun. But generally, there's always gonna be something that you learn about your animal on set, that day, that you're like, "Oh, I should really teach that," because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never thought about that. Like, one of the things is, I try to get my trainers to teach not only, go over and lay down and put your head down, they always want sleepy dogs, like, literally their eyes
Hmm.
closed, right? So, I teach my trainers,
Interesting.
to put your dog down and put their head down in a nice quiet moment when you're watching TV, and start to
Yeah.
say, "You're so tired. You're so tired. You can't keep your eyes open right now. You're so tired." And to kind of go towards the animal's eyes, because when you approach with your hand, what's the natural reaction of the animal? To start to close, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, "You're so tired." And that's how you get those eyes closed. And they learn
Interesting.
that.
That's
So,
so
yeah,
smart. That's cool. I
just
got.
things I
I
figured out.
Yeah, absolutely. I got one more question for you, and we actually answered all of the questions that I had anyway, just through normal conversation. So it worked out very well. Um, how does somebody who wants to be an animal talent agent start? How do they get to? Because I know your path was a little bit different than probably most others, but is there a set structure that you kind of people have to follow in order to get to that point? Or
N no, because that's kinda like life. There's no
yeah,
there's
fair enough.
so, I would say the big thing is, you wanna be in the industry for a while, number 1. It's like, you don't go open up a restaurant because you're a good cook at home, right? You probably
Sure.
go work for somebody and learn how to run the restaurant, learn how to do all the jobs entailed of the restaurant.
Okay.
And
All right.
then
That makes sense.
a few years after you get some experience, then you might have that opportunity, because some of the agencies have, let's just say, gotten older, and they bring on their children, for instance,
Mm,
and then their children's friends. And some people just kind of happen into it like that.
hmm
Especially in Hollywood, back in the day, they would, raise all the children to be working with the animals. And then, the parents would turn 80, and then it gets passed down to the 50-year-old, or, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
but yeah, that's what I would say is, again, I love being on set. I love being on set with my animals. I love being on set with other people's animals. And, definitely it wasn't something that I took on doing without thought too, even though Captain was like, open your own agency. Cause I was like, well, what would that look like? If I were
Right.
to do something like that. And, this is, uh, not, I mean, almost before the internet was like really popular and got bigger and stuff like that. I had to have a lot of local people that I knew, like on my network. And
Mm.
so I've been a professional dog trainer, so I do go to the dog trainers conferences. Right. And
Oh,
so I
sure.
know
Okay.
all of these trainers all over the country and stuff like that. So it's also about being like a networker kind of person, especially in the beginning. And, it's not all about the money, taking the jobs that, you know, you might be like, that one really doesn't pay a whole lot, great, go do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't start out making a whole lot of money. I take jobs because the agency, the friend of mine I was working with and her boss, it would say, oh, I got this thing. And I'd literally drive, 2 hours up to North Jersey to do this little thing with my Jack Russell. And I made like $75, you know?
Mm.
But you know
Yeah.
what? I did it because that's how you get your foot in the door. And again, my
Yep.
dog didn't have a lot of experience. And, other projects that I tell people to take on is reach out to your local theater, right? Local theater, a
Mm.
lot of time will sometimes need a dog for
Yeah.
something. For Sandy, for Toto, for, whatever, Legally Blonde, there's different things. And see if there's a way to have your dog go and do theater, because theater, in my opinion, is one of the best experiences that you can have with your pet, because what it really does is it teaches your dog to work with other people. And this is something, let me mention this too, is that when I hire dogs to do things, a lot of times we want them to look like it's that actor or that model's animal, right?
Mm. Right.
Not be sitting staring at the trainer. Okay. So in theater, I did The Wizard of Oz many years ago with my little Jack Russell, Nikki, who was an all white, rough coat Jack Russell. And I basically dyed her gray, okay, to play the
Mm.
part of Toto. But we spent a month doing that. I would drop her off and I'm like, here's Dorothy, and I'd leave for a few hours just to let her hang out with the whole crew. And then,
Sure.
yeah, when we got into it, it was like a whole month. I didn't make any money off of that. I didn't even charge those people. But you know what
Sure.
I got out of it? I got an amazing relationship with my little 2-year-old Jack Russell.
That's
And
true.
I got to
Yeah.
bring out a lot of things in her, and working with other people that without that opportunity, I don't think she would be as good and ready for her very first movie that she did with Elizabeth Shue at a very
Yeah.
young age. And she was very prepared for all of that. So I think theater is a great place to take and try to get into if you have the opportunity.
That's something I would have never thought of. So that's some good advice. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, I like
Yeah.
working with I mean, I guess it was high school,
Sure.
kids. So,
Do they still get represented in the same way that they would for like film or TV or commercials in terms of like, like there's like a SAG-AFTRA, for actors, that type of thing. Do they still get kind of represented the same way?
well, so animals are basically kind of like, let's see, they're a prop. Okay, they're like
Mm.
a lamp. Like you just
Sure.
literally rented a lamp from me.
Right.
Okay. So, but what I find really interesting is, and the reason why we're like a lamp is because we don't get any residuals, right? Like my sister was an actress. She did Pepsi commercials, all these kind of things. Every single time that Pepsi commercial would air, cha-ching, she's making money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time her Lifetime movie got played, she's making money. Now, if there was a dog in that Lifetime movie, they got paid once. That's
Oh,
it.
okay.
Okay. There are no residuals for the animals, which I think is something in my lifetime that I would really like to change, because I
Sure.
worked on a show many years ago with my bunny rabbit. His name was Bungie on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we had puppets. Okay. So we had puppeteers having their doing these things with the puppets, and then we had the host of the show, and every time that show aired, they got paid. My bunny rabbit, nope, we got paid
Wow.
what we paid. And yeah, and so also, if you there was Gus the groundhog, right, which everything is all
Mm-hmm.
CGI now. That puppeteers out of work. Um,
Sure.
but every time Gus the Groundhog, which was a puppet, would air, he would get paid. The puppies that I supplied,
Yeah.
nope,
Don't.
no, they
That's
didn't get paid.
crazy.
So, and that's the thing I don't think is right, because if a puppeteer has to make the puppet do things, well, we're
Yeah.
making the animals do things, right? And we
Right.
spent lots of time training that. So I absolutely feel like we should get paid. But this is one of the reasons why I opened my own animal talent agency, is because
Yeah.
that was one of the discussions that I had with the owner of an animal talent agency back in the day. And he thought it was absurd and ridiculous that I even mentioned that. And he goes, well, how would that work, right? Like the puppy that we just, I used to take a puppy to the set for a TV show for them. And he was like, well, that little puppy that is, 12 weeks old, who would get paid? Would it be, would we get paid? Would the owner, the breeder get paid for that puppy? Would you get paid? And I said,
Yeah.
you know what? Those are all the things that could be worked out in a contract, okay?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But the old timers, they don't want anything to change,
Yeah.
And so, that's one thing that I would love to be able to change that, because I do feel like that we should get residuals just like the actors. But if we're not going to get that, I find it very interesting that we will sometimes get a talent release for the dog. Like, it's property in the
Right.
eyes of the government, right? It's not my
Sure.
child,
Right.
right? Which you would need a talent release because it's a human child. It's a dog.
Right.
So that's one thing I always find interesting. So,
Yeah. Well, Don, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. This is really cool. This is one of the more interesting interviews that I've done. So
yeah,
yeah, thank you
I
so
hope
much.
you learned something, and thank
I
you for
learned a
having
lot.
me on
Yeah.
this. So, yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing some more of your podcast come out. I've been enjoying watching it.
Great. Thank you.